Rain pressed gently against the cafe window, blurring the city lights into soft streaks of silver and gold. Inside, the warmth smelled of coffee beans and quiet afternoons, yet the man sitting alone by the window seemed untouched by it. His suit was expensive, perfectly tailored, but it hung on him like armor worn too long. The coffee in front of him had gone cold, unnoticed, as his fingers rested around the cup more for grounding than comfort. His eyes were fixed on the rain, heavy with a tiredness that no amount of sleep could cure. He was used to silence, but this kind felt louder. The kind that followed him from boardrooms to private jets, from luxury apartments to empty nights. Success had filled every space in his life except the one that mattered most. Across the cafe, a young woman approached the counter and ordered tea. She moved carefully, as if conserving energy, her shoulders slightly rounded under an invisible weight. Her black dress was simple, modest, and her hair was tied back without fuss. When she turned, her gaze drifted to the window seat, the same seat she always noticed first. Her steps slowed. That chair used to belong to someone else. She hesitated, then chose the table across from him, close enough to see the strain in his face, close enough to recognize a familiar exhaustion. She wrapped her hands around her mug, breathing in the steam like a ritual, but her eyes kept returning to the man by the window. The way he rubbed his temple. The way he exhaled as if even breathing required effort. Before she could stop herself, the words slipped out, soft but sincere. "You look tired, like my husband did before he left." The man flinched slightly, as if pulled from deep water. He turned toward her, surprise flashing across his features, followed by uncertainty. He opened his mouth to apologize, to withdraw, to return to the safety of his silence, but something in her expression held him there. There was no pity in her eyes. No judgment. Only understanding shaped by loss. "I'm sorry," she added quickly, her voice gentle. "I didn't mean to interrupt. It's just. I recognize that kind of tired." He swallowed, his grip tightening around the cup. "Left?" he asked quietly, the single word carrying more weight than he intended. She nodded once, slowly. "Cancer," she said. Not dramatically. Not bitterly. Just truth. 2 years ago. He worked right up until he couldn't anymore. Said stopping made him feel useless. The man's gaze dropped to the surface of his coffee, where his reflection trembled slightly. "I keep telling myself I'll rest when things slow down," he admitted, the confession surprising even him. "They never do." A faint, sad smile touched her lips. They never did for him either. Silence settled between them again, but it was different now, shared, softer. Outside, the rain fell harder, tapping against the glass like a quiet reminder of time passing. Inside, two strangers sat across from each other, bound by an unspoken understanding. Both had been running, and neither knew when to stop. The waitress came by quietly and refilled their cups, the soft clink of porcelain breaking the stillness for just a moment. Neither of them spoke right away. The widow stirred her tea slowly, watching the steam rise and disappear, while the man traced a faint circle on the table with his fingertip, as if grounding himself in something real. "My husband loved cafes like this," she said at last. "He said they made the world feel smaller. Manageable." She let out a breath that was half a laugh, half a sigh. "We used to sit by the window and make up stories about people passing by. It was our way of pretending we had time." The CEO looked up. "Did you?" he asked. She met his eyes. Not enough. Her honesty struck him harder than he expected. In his world, conversations were polished, rehearsed, measured. This was different. This was raw. "I run a company," he said slowly, unsure why he was saying it. "Big one. People think that means I have control. But most days it feels like I'm just reacting, putting out fires, making choices that never feel fully right." She nodded, as if she'd heard this story before. "He used to come home exhausted, sit at the edge of the bed, and stare at the floor. I'd ask how his day was, and he'd say, "Fine." But his eyes told a different story. He gave a small, humorless smile. "That's usually my answer too." She looked at him for a long moment. "When was the last time someone asked you that question and waited for the real answer?" The question lingered in the air. He searched his memory, past assistants, colleagues, friends who needed favors. He found nothing. "I don't remember," he said quietly. Her gaze softened, not with pity, but with recognition. "That kind of loneliness doesn't show on the outside. My husband had it too. Even when the house was full." The rain outside eased into a drizzle, sunlight breaking through the clouds in thin, hopeful lines. The cafe seemed warmer now, brighter, as if responding to something unseen. "This seat," she said, touching the edge of the table, was his favorite. He liked watching people hurry by. Said it reminded him that everyone is carrying something, even if you can't see it. The man glanced at the window, then back at her. "I didn't know I was sitting in someone else's place." She smiled, gentle and sincere. He wouldn't mind. He believed seats were meant to be shared. Something shifted in the man's chest. A quiet ache he'd ignored for years finally made itself known. "I come here because it's the only place I don't feel like I'm performing," he admitted. "No one expects anything from me." She lifted her cup in a small, understanding gesture. "Then maybe this can be your place too." As they stood to leave, the moment felt fragile, like something that could disappear if unacknowledged. He hesitated, then spoke. "I usually don't do this," he said. "But, would you like to sit here again next week?" Her eyes glistened, but she smiled. "Yes," she said softly. "I think we both need it." Thursday arrived quietly, as if the week itself knew to slow down. The cafe looked the same, soft lights, familiar chairs, the window catching reflections of the passing street, but something inside the lonely CEO felt different as he stepped in. For the first time in years, he wasn't rushing. His phone remained in his pocket, silent, ignored. He chose the window seat deliberately and waited. When she arrived, her steps were lighter than before. There was still sadness in her eyes, but it no longer stood alone. She carried it with grace now, alongside something gentler. Hope, perhaps. Or trust. "You're early," she said, smiling as she set her tea down. "So are you," he replied, returning the smile without thinking. It surprised them both. They talked as if continuing a conversation that had never really ended. About small things at first, the weather, the smell of rain on warm pavement, the way the cafe played old music low enough to feel but not hear. Then, slowly, the deeper things surfaced, the ones usually buried under routine and survival. "I used to believe resting was weakness," he admitted, staring out the window. "My father taught me that. Said if I stopped moving, someone else would pass me." She nodded. "My husband believed something similar. Near the end, he told me he was afraid people would forget him if he slowed down." "And did they?" the CEO asked. "No," she said firmly. "They remembered him for who he was when he finally stopped pretending to be strong." The words stayed with him. He felt them settle somewhere deep, reshaping something inside. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges. "He wrote this when he got sick," she said. "I carry it with me on hard days." She slid it across the table. He unfolded it carefully, as if it might break. The handwriting was uneven but steady. "Don't work so hard that you forget why you want it tomorrow." His chest tightened. For a long moment, he couldn't speak. "I think," she said softly, "you needed to read that more than I did today." He nodded, emotion thick in his voice. "And I think I needed to meet you." Outside, the clouds parted, sunlight spilling through the window and warming the table between them. It felt symbolic, but neither of them laughed at that thought. Some moments deserved sincerity. As they stood to leave, he did something he hadn't done in years. He made a decision without fear. "Next Thursday?" he asked. She smiled, her eyes shining. "Next Thursday." They walked out together, not hand in hand, not with promises or expectations, but with lighter hearts. The cafe window reflected them briefly as they passed, two once lonely souls moving forward, no longer alone, finally allowing themselves to breathe.